All righty. Well, thank you so much again, everybody, for joining us for our Catch the King Lunch and Learn today. We have a 2 hour time block, so it's going to be a chunk of your time. So thank you so much for joining. Please take care of yourselves during this time. The point of a lunch and learn is for you guys to be enjoying your lunch and maybe grabbing another cup of coffee. I know I have more than one a day, so definitely take care of yourselves. Come in and out of the webinar as you need it. We're going to go through the agenda here in a second, but I just want to welcome you, and the Wetlands Watch team welcomes you to this exciting community science project that we have going on that's coming up. So our webinar is going to be focused on making sure that everybody on the call is prepped and ready for Catch the King season this year. We have lots of fun events over the next couple of weeks to months as we gear up for the actual King Tide weekend. Lots of resources to share, but also a little bit of background on the program. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. We're going to do some introductions of myself and our CTK coordinator, Stephanie, here in a second. We're going to do a little bit of background on what Catch the King is, why Wetlands Watch developed this community science program, how it's been a hit for all of our coastal Virginia residents and beyond. And then we're going to do, hopefully, Dr. Derek Loftus will be joining us from the Virginia Institute of Marine Science, where he's going to talk a little bit about what do we do with all of that Catch the King data, where does it go, why is it important? After that, we'll turn it over to Dr. Margie Mulholland at ODU to talk a little bit about Measure the Muck, which is Catch the King's sister program focused on water quality of the king tide flooding that comes into our coastal communities. Oh, there's Derek. Fantastic. We're then going to do an app overview. So we're going to walk everybody on this Zoom call. If you've never touched the Sea Level Rise app before, you have no idea what it looks like, you haven't even signed up for an account, we will walk you through step by step. And at that stage, that's where I welcome folks who do have the app and who have been through the process before. Feel free to step away, go grab some lunch, but come back to us after that app training. Because we will be, oh, could I ask everyone to mute themselves, please, as you're joining? That would be fantastic. Thank you so much. But yeah, if you already have the app, you're familiar with it, you can step away during that step, but we will be doing a really nice resources roundup right after that. So come back to us. You'll see some new processes that we've got going on in Catch the King, and get a little bit more familiar with some of those training events. After that, we'll talk a little bit about mapping safety, some tips and tricks for yourselves out in the field. Catch the King is largely, it's an independent or group or team event, so anyone can be as involved with other fellow mappers as much as they want to be. But we also have independent mappers that go out by themselves. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what safety looks like in those different groups. Like I said, we'll go over the Catch the King schedule and resources, and then we'll have time at the end for Q&A. And there will be a couple of instances kind of throughout each section. If you've got questions along the way, we'll make sure you have a spot for that too. So Stephanie will also be monitoring the chat. So if you have questions along the way and you'd rather type them out, feel free to do so. And that is a good segue into introducing ourselves. So, hi, everybody. I am Gabby Kinney. I am the Assistant Director of Living Infrastructure at Wetlands Watch. This is a new role for me. I've actually just been promoted this year, primarily in my early years at Wetlands Watch. I was running the Catch the King Community Science Program, as well as working on the Community Flood Preparedness Fund, which is a state designated grant and loan program for localities to develop resilience plans, study flood resilience in their communities, and also do flood resilience projects. So I have a floodplain management background. I'm a certified floodplain manager, but education and community engagement is where my soul sings. And so the Catch the King program has been such a wonderful part of my heart over the past couple of years. And I am just so, so excited to bring Stephanie Latorno onto the team to be our new Catch the King coordinator. So I'm going to toss it over to her to introduce herself.
Thank you, Gabby. Big shoes to fill over here. Hi, everybody. I'm Stephanie Laterno. I'm excited to be the Catch the King coordinator this year. I am a recent graduate from William & Mary's Batten School for Coastal and Marine Sciences and VIMS. So came straight out of that graduate program and joined the Catch the King initiative, and I'm very excited to be here. I have a background in water quality monitoring with volunteers, and all sorts of community science programs. So some of you might recognize me from other ways that we've interacted, but I'm really excited to be here wearing the Wetlands Watch and Catch the King hat.
Thanks, Stephanie. We're super excited to have Stephanie. She has wonderful creative ideas for how to take Catch the King to new heights, make better engagement with you guys after you volunteer in collect data. And Stephanie is, over the next couple of weeks, she'll be transitioning into the lead point of contact for this program. So my folks who have been around in this program for a while, please, usher her, mentor her as she's rising into this space. But also my new folks, just recognize we've got a little bit of transition going on at Wetlands Watch. Stephanie's in training, but will be doing a fantastic job, already is doing a fantastic job. So she will be running point, and I just want to make that clear. We've got a new wonderful Catch the King at wetlandswatch.org email for all of your wonderful questions. So please use Stephanie's email to reach out for future Catch the King things. I'll still be kind of moving things behind the scenes and involved because I can't keep myself away from this program. But just so you guys know, there's a bit of transition happening on our team. All right, before we get into Catch the King, for those who might not know who Wetlands Watch is, what our nonprofit is, I like to start with a little bit of mission breakdown. So, our mission is to enhance natural resilience, bolster community adaptation efforts, and protect and restore wetlands throughout Virginia. I often show this picture during my presentations to say we work about right where this arrow is in this picture. So we've got a very unique landscape across our coastal communities where we see a lot of folks who love to live and play and recreate on these coastal areas. But a rising sea level issue associated with climate change is bringing waters to our front doorstep. And so we have a jurisdictional issue, we have ecosystem and habitat issues as sea levels rise, the waters come into our communities, our habitats that kind of cohabitate with us along the coast are being overtopped by that sea level rising. So our wetland ecosystems in particular, Wetlands Watch by name is very advocate forward for our wetlands. As sea levels rise, our wetlands can't outpace vertically the rate of sea level rise with their growth. And so their only option is to migrate inland. And so we have this really unique and complex issue to try to manage this climate pressure of sea level rise and water entering our communities, but also work with homeowners and landowners and property owners who live and kind of have property along these areas to keep them safe, to design tools that are important for making sure this transition of habitat goes smoothly and everyone is heard. But also to protect our wetlands because our wetlands do an immense amount of work buffering our ecosystems from storms, buffering our built infrastructure from those damages, water quality, biodiversity, fish, birds, all of the wonderful things we love about our coast. Our core value is to protect those ecosystems. But we've adapted over time into this kind of multidisciplinary approach to this issue. So even though Wetlands Watch has wetlands in the name, we typically do a lot of work with people and policy and actual green infrastructure solutions, which is another way to say nature-based solutions. How do we implement more green into our built infrastructure and built environments so that we can help facilitate that transition? We have a staff of about 7 or 8 right now, and each one of our staff kind of works amongst one of these program areas. We do a lot of cross collaboration on our team. So those who participate and kind of run the Catch the King program will work with our policy folks to make sure they've got the data they need to help advocate to legislators and decision makers. This is where it's flooding. This is where our issues are most problematic, et cetera, et cetera. So it all kind of links together, but we have a lot of expertise and specialty on the Wetlands Watch team. And we're trying to do this creatively. So, throughout our work, we try to develop these communities of practice that invite a diversity of local perspectives. So, folks who come from academia to folks who are just the general public to nonprofits and other contractors and local governments and state governments and federal government. We are trying to be that pin that kind of brings everything together and works across those disciplines to do something creative and things that actually work in our communities in coastal Virginia. Everybody is likely aware that we have just experienced one of these crazy flood events, especially in the Norfolk area. So I have a little bit of content for you. These are pictures from Hurricane Erin. Even though this hurricane did not make landfall, the way that the winds was pushing this storm was actually shoving water into our communities. And so we saw a significant amount of flooding around our coastal areas down in North Carolina, of course, and down the East Coast. So I've got a little bit of a video from our former executive director and Wetlands Watch steward advocate retiree Skip Stiles. So I'm going to play that for you guys for just a quick second.
Norfolk doesn't want you fishing along this shoreline. That's okay. Thanks to sunny day flooding, you can fish, cut bait from your front porch. Problem is, you don't want to feature this amenity, trying to rent your house. No flood disclosure in Virginia. Whoever rents this house on a sunny day, in for a surprise, a day like today.
That's our good Skip. He's always a good flood warrior. We'll talk about a newsletter that we run aside from the Catch the King newsletter a bit later on that Skip's help write, that helps keep folks informed when these flood events are on their way. So he's a bit of our flood advocate right now, and we always love his content. But it points out a very specific issue that folks coming into these areas, it's not specifically unique to coastal Virginia. This is an issue in other places as well. Folks who are unfamiliar with the flood landscape and unfamiliar with sunny day tides don't know that, especially when they're purchasing homes or planning to move here, to rent here, anything like that. And so the more advocacy we can build on sharing that information with others, because Virginia is not a flood risk disclosure state. If you're interested in learning more about that, we have other webinars, and our policy team is working on that flood risk disclosure policy work in the General Assembly. We have lots of time and resources for that outside of the Catch the King space. But just to show you guys how unique this issue is, it's very jarring for folks who see it for the first time. I brought my own dad down to the area to take pictures for Catch the King 2 years ago, and he had never seen this kind of flooding or street signs that say street may flood. And so it's a very unique and daunting issue when we're talking about how we need to approach this in our fully developed and built communities. So just a little bit of a visual for you. We are tracking Hurricane Erin. I hope everyone, those who were engaging with the floodwaters or who might have had an issue with them, I hope everyone's doing all right as those floodwaters recede. So back to the topic at hand, what is Catch the King? All the way back, I would say in 2014, 2015, before my time at Wetlands Watch, Skip and a few other partners, so Old Dominion University with Margie, of course, Derek Loftus at VIMS, and other, we have an extraordinaire Dave Mayfield, who used to be a Virginia pilot reporter, knew that there was this niche. We knew this issue was coming. We knew sea level rise was happening. We were seeing flood events more frequently in our communities. But we also knew that the public would generally be very interested to participate and help collect data for this issue. And so the Sea Level Rise app was developed at that time to empower people to actually say when and where it's flooding in their communities. The app then looks a lot different than it does now. We've gone over many, many years of updates and revisions based on public feedback and our volunteers. So we're loving the way it looks now, and it's a really powerful tool to help delineate that flooding and to get people feeling like they're a part of that climate change solution. The mapping itself and all the data collection we collect with the Sea Level Rise app contributes to flood modeling and sea level rise prediction. So the more we learn about what flood events are going on today and how far inland that flood water is coming in, the more we can learn about what that might look like in the future. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means in terms of the king tides on another slide. It also builds public awareness and safety. So bringing volunteers into this program builds, of course, awareness, broad scale awareness to this issue, but also educates our volunteers on what it means to interact with floodwaters, not just what are those waters doing on the landscape, how is it interacting with those unstable and at-risk ecosystems on our coast, like our wetlands? How do we develop more advocacy efforts around this issue, despite it being kind of one of the most visual representations of climate change in Virginia? And then we have organized data collection efforts all over, like I said, coastal Virginia. We've expanded some efforts into North Carolina, and we have a wonderful tide captain down in Skidaway Island, Georgia this year as well. And again, I saw someone from Massachusetts in the chat. So Catch the King is getting out there, guys. And I know that that's not just in part due to myself and the Wetlands Watch team and Stephanie, but you guys are speaking up and speaking out about this program. So thank you so much for doing that. And we are so excited to share this with folks who might be new from other states. For those that don't know, Catch the King is a Guinness World Record holding program. In 2017, we had over 700 people volunteer to collect data. And we learned after that fact that, oh, excuse me, my Alexa thinks that I'm talking to her. 1 second, guys. There we go. So we, yeah, had 700 volunteers, massive effort, huge public media response. And so we had Derek Loftus kind of spearheaded the design and the submitting to the Guinness World Record book that, hey, we think we've got something pretty awesome here, and we think we've done something substantial. Lo and behold, we received the Guinness World Record for most contributions to an environmental survey. And so we still hold that title, as far as I know. And of course, we'd love to break the record again. This is a bit what our volunteers, just a sample of what our volunteer teams look like. We've got, of course, Margie up here in the top left. Some of our folks who have been with us for a few years recognize many of these photos we've used in our slides over the years. We've got our Master Naturalist, Master Gardener groups. We've got folks from William and Mary who have designed their own effort. We have a great professor there who's been running as a tide captain for his students. Girl Scouts down here in the bottom left. We've got that water quality monitoring with Margie happening in these corners here. And then again, I always share this photo because on this woman's chest is actually our youngest Catch the King mapper ever. That is a newborn baby out there collecting floodwater data. So all to say, we have lots of different kinds of people participating in this program. There's a lot of different ways to approach your volunteerism. There's no one right way to do it. And so if you're by yourself or with a group of people, or it's just you and one other person, there are lots of different ways you can go out and collect data and report out that flooding. So always fun to see the smiling Catch the King volunteer faces. A little bit more about what Catch the King is, why we call it Catch the King specifically. Our program is designed to focus on the king tide season. So for those unfamiliar with king tides, this is a seasonal occurrence, happens twice a year. You might have heard the Perigean spring tides as one reference to talk about king tides. And it's a process, and I am no astronomer, so no one quote me on my science here. But as far as I'm aware, the orbital rotation of the moon around the Earth happens in this ellipse. And so on one side of the ellipse, the moon ends up closer to Earth than on the other. And so I'm hoping you guys can see my mouse there. I'm kind of demonstrating that. So as the moon rotates around the Earth, we get these periods of time where the gravitational pull from the moon is higher than other times of year. And it can be especially powerful when the moon is aligned with the sun, because the sun is its own celestial body, has its own gravitational pull. So the combination of the alignment of the sun and the moon and the earth pulls tides up on one side of the earth and makes them extremely low on the opposite side of the earth. So super high tides over here, super low tides over here. And again, this is a seasonal occurrence. These are things that we can predict using our knowledge, scientific knowledge of the orbits of these celestial bodies. But just a little bit of the science background. This is why we consider this king tide phenomenon to be our window, per se, into the future. All of that data actually gets plugged into and designed into a calendar, again, by Derek Loftus at VIMS. This is a resource we share each and every year with our volunteers across our newsletters and channels. It's a great calendar if you want to keep an eye on when you shouldn't take Llewellyn Avenue in Norfolk. Maybe this calendar might be nice next to your computer. But it pulls out the king tides, amplified high tides, as well as the moon cycle. So you can kind of see when that intersection of full moon plus amplified high tides might occur. And then we get events, of course, like this week during Hurricane Erin, where there are some standalone higher high water events that we can collect data around. So just know that that calendar is floating. These are somewhat predictable events. We can look at tide charts ahead of time, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. But luckily, king tides add a little bit of predictability to our event, which is why we were able to do this. So that final takeaway there again is studying these king tides of today, these kind of astronomically high tides that we can predict, help us understand that with sea level rise, what our normal high tide events might be like in the future. So when we walk out into our communities on a sunny day and we see flooding in the streets, we know that that could be our everyday mean high water throughout into the future. So 2050, 2060, 2070. And so the more we study what these king tides are doing and how they're interacting with our communities today, the more prepared we can be in the future. So that's kind of the high level takeaway for this program. Sights and scenes from our volunteer data collection look a little bit like this. A lot of these are taken by our volunteers. And so you can see that everything from boat ramps to very urbanized areas. This is an apartment building here with a parking lot that always floods. I believe there's a running boardwalk through here too, like a recreational boardwalk. So runners who use that route regularly are barred from access during a flood event. And one big note here in the bottom right, you can see there's a car driving through the floodwaters, and I will probably say this more than once during this presentation. Don't drive through floodwaters. Floodwaters are salt water, and so they can actually damage and corrode the underside of your car. But as we'll see, or as we saw on those pictures with Skip's video, especially at night, it's very difficult to tell how deep those floodwaters are, as well as what debris might be hanging out underneath it. And so the Federal Emergency Management Association's way to kind of garner the public's attention on this is to say, turn around, don't drown. Anytime you see flood waters on the road in places that you're trying to access, turn around. It's definitely not worth trying to get stuck. We see cars stuck all the time who attempt to drive through those floodwaters. So that's my little soapbox. Definitely just be super careful when you're seeing these floodwaters come around your community, and especially while you're out mapping for Catch the King. We also care about this event. I've talked a lot about kind of the protection of wetlands, this transition of habitat with our built communities. But it's also, again, a very public safety issue. And so one of the barriers that we're seeing in a lot of our coastal communities is actually barriers to transportation access for schools. So bus routes that have to make it through these floodwaters during a normal high tide event. For those who live on the coast, you might be familiar that tide times kind of cycle an hour amongst each other each day. So you could get a high tide right at the time your bus is coming around to pick your kids up. And so we're really concerned with what are the access for this? How do we manage students trying to get to school? Do they need to develop flood plans? And in some places, that is a thing. So we're not just concerned about it from a climate change and kind of large scale issue, but also very small scale and just making sure that folks have access to the places that they need to be. Margie will go into this a little bit later, but another thing we're concerned about is water quality. So as those floodwaters infiltrate our communities, it's picking up anything it can grab on the street. So we all know that cleaning our communities, keeping it free of pollution, picking up trash is a really great stewardship thing to do. I hope that as you see what these floodwaters are doing, you add a little bit more stewardship angle into your brain. Think about anything from dog poop in a dog park, which happens a lot, again, in our coastal communities, to just trash bags or trash cans that have been tipped over by this floodwater. Especially when we get a kind of high velocity rain event like Hurricane Erin, we're seeing swaths and swaths of this water coming into our community, knocking things over, floating things away. And everything that water collects on the landscape is finding its way back out into the coast. And the stop that it takes before it gets all the way back out into the coast is our wetlands, in cases where there are wetlands, still existing. And so the stewardship angle of that is make sure that while you're out mapping, and if you're not going to map, if you just want to be a better steward during these flood events, maybe clean up your community a little bit and make sure that your neighbors know that maybe they should pull their trash cans in when a king tide event is coming up, because water quality issues are of course a great concern. And I'm not going to steal Margie's thunder on that, but I hope that you guys can feel a little bit more of that stewardship angle as well. So Catch the King data collection, how does it work? So this is a little screen grab from the Sea Level Rise app. This is what your tools tab will look like, and we'll talk all about this a little bit later on. Every single one of the GPS pins that you drop in your app is correlated to one of these highly specific GPS coordinates. All of this, every time you drop a pin, it's automatically recorded, and our team can actually export data sheets like this using a web portal that we'll also talk about a little bit later on. But it also collects all sorts of other information, like who collected it, what mapping event was it for, when was that event created, the latitude and longitude again, how accurate was that pin recording. So this is what we're working with, is a GPS documentation of where that floodwater is occurring, how far it's coming inland. And again, the kind of sciencey term for that is delineation. So we're delineating those floodwaters. Each one of those data sheets gets shared with Derek Loftus at VIMS, and I will do my best to not steal his thunder either, because he's going to give some presentation slides here in a minute. Each one of those pins can be populated onto a map, and this specific map here is the Tidewatch portal that VIMS has developed. And again, I'm going to let Derek go into that in more detail, but you can see that there's a lot of data in coastal Virginia. This is a map from 2017 to 2023. So each of those pins come into a mapping portal like this, used to validate flood prediction models going on at VIMS. And this is just one research angle to show you, this is a visual from Derek as well, just to show you what that modeling works looks like. So the Tidewatch model is doing this kind of light blue layer here. This is its prediction of what that tidewater was going to look like. And these pins are our volunteer collected pins. So what this image is showing you is the comparison of what our volunteers collected versus what the model said was going to happen. And so a little bit of validation and data quality control can happen here. So all of our volunteers are contributing to this really mass effort to fine tune those flood prediction models that make our communities more safe. Being a Catch the King volunteer is, of course, all about going out in the field, bringing your phone out with you, documenting those floodwaters, and being a steward. So we'll go over a couple of those roles. We have a nice little quick guide for you. So if you're ever trying to, recruit your neighbors or you just want to communicate to somebody what it is that you do as part of this program, we have a quick guide for you with lots of kind of quick information on that part of your role. So volunteers, of course, capture the flood data using the Sea Level Rise app. They take photos of flood impacts. I can't stress enough how far photos go visually to help us communicate this issue, not just amongst our peers and our partners, but also to decision makers and legislators. If for any reason you go through this training and you decide the phone app is too much for me, please go out in the field and just take photos. We would love to get an email from you that's just all image files, because again, that goes a long way with helping us advocate for this issue. Stewardship, again, of wetlands and natural areas. So the more you learn about how floodwaters are interacting in your community, the more familiar you'll become with how it's interacting with the natural landscape as well. We, again, at Wetlands Watch have a lot of expertise around this issue. And so if you're interested in diving deeper into that intersection of wetlands migration and how we manage that on the landscape of the coast, we would love to chat with you more. And then, of course, Catch the King volunteers also network and form teams in their own communities. A lot of our tide captains is what we call them, and we'll go over that in just a second. They help recruit within their own network. So again, Girl Scouts, Master Naturalists, Master Gardeners, Boy Scouts, academia, so classrooms, environmental justice efforts. There are lots and lots and lots of ways for us to form teams on this effort and for people to take Catch the King and adapt it as their own and into their own program areas. And then, of course, can't say it enough. It's an educational program at its core. And so getting folks kind of aware of the sea level rise issue, the climate pressures that are driving it, and becoming part of that solution is kind of the most heartwarming part of it all, is that you guys get to be a part of something that's helping inform our communities and keep them safe. I wanted to do a little bit of a review of what happened in 2024. So each year we usually run a volunteer appreciation event after all of our volunteers participate. We get through the holidays, and then usually around January, February time in the new year, we run this kind of big celebration event for all of our efforts. Last year, we collected almost 23,000 pins across coastal Virginia specifically. There was more outside of coastal Virginia, of course, but just to show you this area. 187 volunteers. Norfolk had the most data, but I added a little asterisk there because even though we kind of pull out which communities have the most data, it's not always what's the most data that's important. It's quality data. It's, again, that engagement with our volunteers. We do this kind of heat map to show that there's a lot of effort happening in Norfolk, as it is the community with the highest rate of sea level rise on the East Coast. So it makes sense that there's a lot of advocacy here. But just to show you the heat map, that our program is growing and is reaching, I think, as far north as Northern Virginia, Alexandria area. We didn't get a formal effort in there last year, but we are still engaged with the group that was interested. And so we're hoping to stretch all the way up there again this year. We had 5 top mappers collect over 500 pins. And again, I use an asterisk on that because we are not concerned with how many pins you can collect out in the field. It is awesome to see that effort, especially if you've got a shoreline in your community. It can be really easy to stack up all of those pins. But really, it's about the data quality, you guys getting out in the field, having that exposure, and doing all the things that are associated with being a wetlands steward. So just wanted to share that with you guys. 2023, we had 122 volunteers, so we're slowly growing, and I think we're already past this number on our interest form this year, so we're super excited to see that continue to grow. I mentioned earlier that we were a Guinness Book of World Records holder. And so I wanted to show this chart because I think it's important, again, to understand, even though in 2017 we had that massive focused effort, it was amazing. We can do a lot more with a lot less volunteers. And so 700 was awesome. Again, that public media effort was really focused around the Tidewater and Hampton Roads area. But in 2024, you can see how far we've grown. And if you, this map is available to explore on the VIMS website. If you zoom in on these clusters, you will be able to see the actual spread of all of those pins. So the larger the kind of cluster here, that means the more data was collected. So we have this really concentrated effort in Norfolk and Virginia Beach in 2017, but now we've got folks out on the Eastern Shore super pumped and engaged for the past couple of years. We've got folks on the Middle Peninsula and Northern Neck out up to Williamsburg. Again, William and Mary participated last year, so getting their students involved was a fantastic addition to the program. So just to show you, even though we broke our world record in 2017, we are still growing and expanding our knowledge of this issue with our volunteers that are engaged. Here's a little bit of a screen grab using that same heat map to show you some of the data collected. We try to show a diversity of where people are going. There's a lot of coastlines, of course. We are in the coast, so going to the beach and going to various coastlines is obviously a wonderful place to collect data. But we also get very urbanized areas, so detention ponds that might have tidal influence or are connected to a tidally influenced creek. Boat ramps, backyards, so people's private property, sometimes they want to map right in their backyard because they have shorelines. So anything can be done with this program as long as it's accessible and long as it's safe. And we'll talk a little bit more about what the parameters for that are in our safety chat a little bit later on. Another fun thing that we've done in the past, and I just stuck this in today because I thought it might be good to show you that our Catch the King coordination team, and Stephanie especially as she's on board, we're trying to find new ways to get eyes on this program, new ways to connect other data into our core Catch the King data collection, so that we can access people more and we can share more of what's happening about the king tides that isn't just our pins on a map. So one thing that we've done last year was our first time piloting an aerial king tide monitoring effort with South Wings. They're a volunteer pilot program. So we have a handful of volunteer pilots who come down and actually take our core research and behind the scenes team up in the air during these king tides events so that we can actually see what's happening from above and we can understand what might be a better mapping location. We can cross-reference those locations with data we've collected, make sure we're getting data in the areas that need it most. Aerial photography goes a long way for demonstrating that wetland migration issue. You can see this is a road, I believe this is out in Pocosin, and very, very at-risk road. So we've built this infrastructure, and those wetlands are trying to find anything to grab onto and continue to survive with that sea level rise. And then, of course, very urban areas in Norfolk. And our prior Catch the King coordinator, some of you might remember Josie Shostak. We still have her photos and as well as Lathan Gumas, who I don't think is with Virginia Sea Grant anymore, but his photos are still available online. He was with Sea Grant at the time we were doing South Wings together. So lots of wonderful aerial photos of king tides as well that you guys are more than welcome to check out. So I've added those QR codes there for you. And with that, I will turn it over to Derek Loftus to give us a little bit more detail on what happens with Catch the King data and what the Virginia Institute of Marine Science is doing. Derek, do we have you on the line?
Yep, I'm here. Thank you so much for that introduction, Gabby. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. And I will give you, let me stop sharing really quick. And I will give you share permissions. Okay, you should be good to go.
All right, give me 1 second and I will get my slides up on the screen. Thanks for giving me the sharing permissions. So I am a research professor at the Virginia Institute of Marine Science at William and Mary, and a lot of my background deals with trying to make use of this valuable flood forecast information that all of you are helping us collect. The whole goal with this information is to help make our forecast models better. And we have a model called Tide Watch that is available on adaptva.org that allows people to very quickly kind of understand and see what our models look like and where the inundation is happening in their area. So let me see if if I can get that on the screen. All right, let me know if you can see my slides.
Not yet, Derek, I don't think.
All right. Let me stop sharing my screen and see if it will work again. All right. How about now?
There it is. It looks like it's loading. So 1 second. There it goes. Yep.
Cool.
Thank you, Derek.
Yeah, so we have a model and sensors that help us show where live inundation is happening all throughout coastal Virginia. Just to give some kind of background to that, we, of course, are collecting water level sensor data all throughout coastal Virginia and along Chesapeake Bay up into Maryland and South and North Carolina as well. Our goal is mostly to deploy new water level sensors, but as you might would imagine, with the community science efforts, we can't just deploy water level sensors everywhere. And so during these particular high tide events, like the highest astronomical tide of the year during king tides, and when those tides happen to coincide with coastal storms like Hurricane Erin, that just affected us yesterday, that gives us an opportunity to help identify where the inundation is happening and help us improve the accuracy of our hydrodynamic models that we use to calculate where the flooding is going to happen before it does. So since 2017, we deployed this program called Storm Sense that I've been helping coordinate with a lot of the localities in Hampton Roads and in other regions of coastal Virginia. And through the help of Maricus, we are working to deploy more water level sensors through 2029. There's 4 of them slated to be installed in 2025. And so we've been pretty excited about this, mostly because a lot of the water level sensors we've been able to deploy so far in coastal Virginia have mostly been in Hampton Roads because those localities have more funding to be able to cover water level sensors, which is great. But of course, we know our rural localities are also being flooded on a regular basis on the eastern shore and the middle peninsula and northern neck of Virginia. And so we're working to deploy more water level sensors in those regions as well. And with the data that you've helped collect, for example, last year in 2024, we collected 22,845 high water marks. And we collected these data over the entire weekend of the king tide last year. And we're doing the same again this year on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. But across all of those dates, what we were able to do with that information, not just during the king tide weekend, but during inundation events that were happening during the fall and spring, as Gabby pointed out, usually the inundation is worse in the fall, and of course it's made even further exacerbated, I guess, the conditions due to the fact that there's leaves that are usually falling and blocking all of our storm drainage systems, on top of the fact that the vegetation is simply not absorbing as much rainwater combined with tidal incoming water during these events in the fall, so they tend to be a bit more pronounced. And as a result, we use this information not just to validate our models, but also to help us cite where new water level sensors are going to be deployed. So your king tide data are not just helping us show where the inundation is happening in real time, but we're also providing that information to localities to help us select locations that, yeah, we can confirm there is inundation here. In fact, we had volunteers check data in 2018, 2022, and 2024, for example. And so we can now show localities, these are places where there's recurring inundation that you can further legitimize deploying a water level sensor in this area, because it's not just a one-time thing, it's a frequent inundation effort. And so on top of that, we have our model called the Tide Watch map, and its forecasts collect basically 2.5 gigabytes of atmospheric forecast data from the National Weather Service, and it does this to predict storm surge from wind-driven inundation along with changes in pressure fields to help us predict inundation up to 36 hours in advance. And it does this everywhere in Virginia's tidewater region at roughly 1 meter or 3-foot spatial resolution. And we're able to do that thanks to the LiDAR-derived digital elevation models that are built into the TideWatch map. Now, it updates twice daily at noon and midnight. And the benefit behind this particular model is that it really doesn't take a long time to run. It is using parallel computing at roughly 1.5 hours of real time to run 72 CPUs on the William and Mary High Performance Computing Platform to essentially use the Schism open source hydrodynamic model to serve you on your web browser an interactive flood map that shows where the inundation is happening before it does. And so this is kind of an example of what the model looks like hour by hour. And those red dots are data collected by past Catch the King volunteers that help us verify where the inundation is happening and help us geospatially compare what those results look like. So for example, there's 345 points that were collected there, and it told us that we're roughly plus or minus about 15 feet from each of those individual points on a horizontal scale. So the way that I usually visualize this in my last slide is essentially saying, hey, we can look at the data that you're collecting on the Sea Level Rise mobile app developed by Wetlands Watch. And all those individual points, we're looking at the iPad interface in this case, but you could be on iOS or Android. And we convert all of those points or pins that you drop during inundation events, and we translate those into geographic information systems points and convert those into contours. We compare those with the digital elevation model that will tell us specifically what the elevation inundation height is, but we also compare it with the pixels that were projected to be flooded with the TideWatch map, and we compare the distance between each of those individual points. And so, again, that gives us a very simple metric. In this instance, we're looking at roughly 7.16 is our distance between these points or 120 individual points. And with that information, that helps us verify the inundation distances and extents that we're seeing in real time. So hopefully that gives you at least a loose understanding of specifically what we're doing with the Catch the King data that you're collecting. It's not just during the king tides. We always emphasize safety, but there are oftentimes eager volunteers that are interested in collecting data, like during yesterday's Hurricane Erin event, which thankfully was not particularly dangerous. But of course, we have seen people collect data, during and after tropical storm systems and during hurricanes. Just please wait until after the storm has passed and ensure that the ground and the areas around you that you're collecting data are safe before you do so. But oftentimes those storms leave debris lines or rack lines that you can collect data after the fact, and we usually just advise volunteers to leave a note in the app indicating that, ignore the timestamps. These are data collected for this hurricane. So the timestamps that are collected automatically by the app don't necessarily directly reflect when the inundation was happening in that area. And for most of the events that are tracking a hurricane, usually we already know this, but for tidal flooding events where sometimes they're open for multiple days, that's not as immediately evident. So just keep that in mind as you're collecting the data. That's always helpful for people like me that are trying to interpret what do your data mean when we're looking at them in a geographic information system. So thank you so much, Stephanie and Gabby, for allowing me to take some time to speak to the data that you guys have been helping collect for. This is the 9th year of Catch the King since 2017. And I've been truly thrilled to see the over 250,000 high water marks and the data that you've collected since the inception of this project, and just all the continuing data that we continue to see. So thank you again.
Thank you so much, Derek. We will open it up next for just a very quick Q&A. So if you're okay with it, Derek, I'll keep you
Sure.
spotlighted for just a minute. We do already have one in the chat from Mike asking, I'm a teacher hoping to get my students out on a field trip to map the October King tide. I noticed the full moon is on October 6th. Can you recommend a specific day that tides will be highest? I can do October 6th, Monday to October 10th, Friday.
So it depends specifically on where you're located. I know each individual place is a little bit different. We've, of course, specifically selected, October 10th is the first day of Catch the King. So that's usually when we've got volunteers collecting data for this particular event. Let's see that you're in Hampton. Thank you for that information. So yeah, in this case, actually, I think Thursday may be a little bit higher than Friday. So just keep that in mind. We usually try to target a weekend for Catch the King, just knowing that volunteers usually have a little bit more time to be able to collect data. But based on the harmonic forecasts that the Virginia Institute of Marine Science provides, along with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration at Sewell's Point, the area closest to Hampton where you noted, it looks like Thursday, October 9th, will be the highest astronomical tide of that window that you listed from the 6th to the 10th. The 10th, 11th, and 12th, of course, is Catch the King this year on that weekend. But most of our volunteers are usually not as easily able to get out there on Thursday morning and collect data. But if that's when your class as an educator is able to collect those data, I'd highly encourage you to do that. And more often than not, usually what we end up doing is trying to make the window for Catch the King slightly larger than the actual window that people will be collecting data. So I'll have to confirm with Gabby and Stephanie if we're able to open the window for a day before Catch the King starts, just to make sure that those data are still able to be collected. Is that okay?
Yes, yeah. Stephanie and I were actually just messaging each other last night about getting the formal events up and going in the Sea Level Rise app. And originally I was like, well, we didn't have as many volunteers available on Thursday last year, but hearing that, I think we might go back and maybe edit those, Stephanie, knowing that the 9th is pretty high. And so we'll open the events. We'll go through the process for everyone to join for the Sea Level Rise app training, but we'll go back and edit it and make sure that event's open on Thursday as well for everybody.
Yeah. Sorry to create any extra work. I'm just realizing I know year to year, the Sea Level Rise app is very flexible in terms of what an event is. I know during the pandemic, we had people that were always offering to collect data at all different times. And so I think I left the King Tide event open for like 3 months at one point, but from August all the way to the
Mhm.
beginning of November. And it will collect data, but it's not as rewarding for volunteers because in the app, usually your pins in the earlier versions of the app were not instantly showing up when the data were collected. They'd only show up on the map after the event closed. So for a 3 month period of time, you couldn't see your points, but they were there in the app. It was just had to do with the way that the back end of the data portal were collecting and reporting data. But it
Yeah.
wouldn't show data until the event was closed and finished. So it is
Yes.
different now in the newest version of the app. So you can see
Mhm.
your data before the event has officially closed, which is nice.
And if anybody, especially for those who are new, but also our returning volunteers, if you see a high water event that is not an event listed in the Sea Level Rise app and you're not a tide captain, so you don't have access to create your own, we are always more than happy to take in that feedback and we can create an event for you. So anytime you see a flood event that works better for you, please reach out to Stephanie with that Catch the King email. It'll come up a couple times, and I think she's dropped it in the chat there. So definitely reach out to us if you want to. And I'll also say, Mike, if you are ever interested in hearing how some of the other professors who are networked in Catch the King have done it with their students, we're more than happy to connect you. But thank you so much for bringing it to your students. We're excited to have them participate this year.
Absolutely.
Anybody else have questions at this stage? Questions for Derek? Questions on the Catch the King kind of background program, why we do this work before we move on?
Well,
All
thank you
right.
guys so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Derek. Next up, we are going to bring in Margie. So I am gonna transition Margie's slides for her. So Margie, again, just let me know when you want me to advance the slide. But we're so excited to have Margie on board. And Margie has a grad student who I'm sure she'll talk about in her presentation, Alyssa Bucci, who has been kind of coordinating the Measure the Muck program for the last year, and she's doing it again this year. So we're super excited to have them on the call to talk a little bit more about water quality. So the floor is yours, Margie.
Gotta unmute myself first. Thanks everybody for coming and thanks for inviting me, Gabby and Stephanie. Alyssa couldn't be here today, but I'll speak for her. And before Alyssa, Alfonso Macias Tapia was the organizer of the event. And he's actually published 3 papers about our measuring of the muck, which we do while we're catching the king. So the whole project was actually started in conjunction with the first Catch the King Tide event. And some of it came about because of beta testing the phone app way back in the 2014. Gabby mentioned that they were just starting to launch the phone app, and we would go around and test it. And during that time, I would look at the water and think, ugh, that water is just gross. It's full of literally, I won't say the word, but it's a 4-letter word that is just like poop. And anyway, there was literally so much stuff in the water. And at the time, I was on the Chesapeake Bay Program Science and Technical Advisory Committee. And they were at the point where they were establishing that nutrient diet for the Chesapeake Bay. And that nutrient diet was set as total maximum daily loads for watershed, but I knew they were not counting this tidal flooding. And as you can see, there's garbage cans tipped over, there's everything in the water. And so it was a mess. And so that motivated us to start measuring the muck while we caught the king. So Gabby, can you show the next slide? Okay, and we know tidal flooding has increased over time as a result of sea level rise. And this is a figure a colleague of mine put together about the hours spent 1 foot above mean higher high water since the 1930s when sea levels were measured. And you can see 2024 was the floodiest year on record. And we've had a lot of floody years, and that is increasing over time. If you want to go to the next slide, Gabby. And so what happens when the tide comes in is when we get these king tides is we have the water sitting well behaved in its basin. This is a cartoon that Alfonso made. And then the high tide comes and everything on the landscape has the potential to get input into the river once the floodwaters recede. And as you can see in the pictures on either side, that can be construction debris, pet waste, garbage, anything, literally anything on the landscape at all. And this wasn't being counted toward that nutrient diet for the bay. And the reason why it wasn't counted is actually it's very hard to measure because you have to know a lot about the condition of the river before the before it floods the landscape. You have to have lots of floodwater samples collected nearly at the same time at high tide. And then you need to know the floodwater volume. Our monitoring programs enabled us to know a lot about the condition of the Lafayette River at the time. That's where we initiated this project. And so we knew a lot about the in-water conditions in the river. Catch the King and Derek's work made us able to calculate the floodwater volume. And then all we needed to do was go out and collect a bunch of samples all at once. So Gabby, if you can go to the next slide. So what we did is we devised a way to measure the muck while capturing the king. Sorry, that got cut off a little. But we needed to get enough volunteers to collect enough samples, we needed to make sure there was going to be a high tide. And so we organized around Catch the King. We knew there'd be a lot of volunteers out. We knew there'd be school groups that needed volunteer hours. And these in the picture here are a group of students from ODU, Maury High School, and Blair Middle School. And so we organized a bunch of students that year, in the first year, to collect samples while they were mapping. And so what we did is we put people in groups, and one person would catch the king, do the mapping phone app. One person would sample, and one person would record the information, both in the phone app and then on a hard copy. And so we were able to tap into this group that needed a lot of volunteer hours and have them catch the king. Could you go to the next slide, Gabby? Thank you. And so what we did, this is what it sort of looked like, is they downloaded the phone app, so they had their phone. We gave them a map and pointed to places that they should go because we knew we couldn't have them running all over the city. You know, they wouldn't have time to collect the sample about at high tide. We only wanted them to go out for about an hour. And so we would send them to a certain spot that we thought it would flood. We gave them a recording sheet and a clipboard that they brought with them. And then we gave them a cooler that had sample bottles that were numbered on them, ice packs, and we gave them gloves, of course, because we didn't want them to be exposed to that floodwater. And then from these bottled samples, we could measure we'd process the samples in the lab. Actually, can you go to the next slide? So what it looked like in the lab is people came to the lab, got their coolers, and then afterwards we processed the samples, got them stabilized until we could get them analyzed. Because the nutrient samples, that takes a lot of analytical work. We also measured Enterococcus fecal bacteria because we were worried that it was getting in the water as well. And so we had separate bottles that we would collect samples to do Enterococcus analyses. And Enterococcus is a fecal indicator. That's what the Department of Health does when they monitor your beaches after a storm, say. They do the same assay that we do. Okay, next slide. And so we send people out to different areas where it floods, and we see all kinds of things. And essentially, the upshot of this work, and I'll just give you the main results now, is we found that during a single tidal flooding event, we could deliver the entire annual load allocation that was assigned to the Lafayette River by the EPA for its nutrient diet. So that's a significant load that's not being counted toward its restoration. We're actually now, the EPA is using some of our data to revise their next generation Bay program models so that they can have this information to help advise that restoration. The other thing we discovered was that Enterococcus was way above safe levels in the floodwaters. And so there were only, I think, 3 samples that came back at the fishable, swimmable standards set by the Department of Health. So these are nasty waters, and people should certainly not be swimming in them, like you see that person in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. That shouldn't be happening. But kids, I've seen on days where it floods and buses can't get to bus stops, you see kids playing in the floodwaters, and they really shouldn't be doing that. And this year, we're really excited because we're hoping to have medical students, and I have another collaborator at public health that's identified Vibrio vulnificus in the water. That's a flesh-eating bacteria that can cause illnesses. And she's identified that in the floodwater as well. And we're hoping to get more information from these medical students to help us identify like potential routes of exposure and potential illnesses that might, or health consequences that might result from exposure to floodwater. So we're really excited about that. Gabby, can you go to the next slide? Oh, this is it. Okay. Yeah, so you see these are just more pictures of people going out sampling. And as I said, they're also catching the king while they're measuring the muck. So they're doing both. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so in 2024, we had an unprecedented 20-day period of flooding. And I was teaching a research-based class, and we had the class go out and sample 8 days in a row that it flooded. And we're trying to determine whether the loading of fecal matter and nutrients gets attenuated over time. You know, once it's flooded once, is less delivered on each subsequent flooding. You know, we don't know, but we think that's probably the case. But there's also the case that the water sits on the landscape quite some time, so it could be interacting with the soils as well. So we sampled 5 days in a row last October and 8 days in a row in September last fall with the class. Next slide. And the next ones are just showing some of the results from 2024, but essentially with 47 volunteers in the Lafayette and Elizabeth River last year, we were able to collect 282 floodwater samples, which was a record. And 82% of the samples were over the safe contact limit for Enterococcus, so for fecal bacteria. So please don't swim in this water. Next slide, Gabby. Yeah, and this is just showing pictures of some of the areas it floods, because you can take pictures in the phone app in both Catch the King and another phone app that we've developed to log in information about their location. So these are just pictures volunteers take. We also have them right down in the app where exactly the location was that they took the sample, so that we know that and can relate it to the volume. Next slide, Gabby.
I want to say real quick, Margie, that
Oh.
I don't think anything captures sunny day flooding like
Oh.
this picture in the bottom left with that crystal clear reflection. That's just what a great photo. That's a good one.
Yeah, that was a volunteer took that. Yeah, and then we expanded our sampling efforts in 2024 because we know not every land use is equal. It's going to deliver the same amount of nutrients. So we tried to expand into a more rural area. And so we were able to get samples up near Gloucester last year, and on the and we had a group go out of VIMS to do that. We had 53 volunteers in October last year, and in October, that included the volunteers from VIMS. And we were able to collect 260 floodwater samples then on the weekend. The flooding wasn't as intense in the October event as it was in the September event. But again, we found 53% of the samples were over the safe contact limit for Enterococcus. So pretty gross water. Next slide, Gabby. Thanks. And this is, again, just some pictures of places it floods taken by the volunteers, and these are just some sample bottles. Last year, we also collected samples to analyze for PFAS, or the forever chemicals, and so that's little baggie sitting in the lower picture is the samples we collected for that, and then the state lab analyzed those for us. Next slide. And then just more pictures. It was much more rural up near Gloucester And we had a Sea Grant photographer out with Alyssa and her team up there. And these are some of the pictures that they took and the areas they mapped. And this is the flyer for 2025. And we'll be having two big events, one on September 13th that'll be based out of ODU. We'll assemble there at 12:45 in the afternoon. And then in October 11th, because there's an event on campus, we're going to stage out of the Elizabeth River Project's Ryan Resilience Lab on Colley Avenue. And this is the QR code, so if you're interested in participating, you can contact me or Alyssa, and we can get you set up with what you need. But thanks, Gabby.
Thank you, Margie. Always a joy to have you talk about these very, very scary yet very, very informative concepts. I feel like every time I hear you talk about them, I get a new wave of wanting to go do better for our communities. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
I will leave this flyer up for just a second. And I think, did I do another? Okay, we can pause it on the flyer screen. Does anybody have questions for Margie in the Measure the Muck program before we move into our app training? Alrighty, well, scan that QR code. If you haven't filled out our interest form, as Margie mentioned, you can scan that QR code in the bottom left. The one in the middle will take you to our website, but this one on the bottom left here will take you to that interest survey. There should be a little checkbox on there about whether or not you're interested in Measure the Muck. And so we forward that information along to Alyssa and she will connect with you on that project. So feel free, if you've already filled it out and you missed it, feel free to fill it out again. We'll make sure you get captured in there. But I'll leave that up for just another second. Thank you so much, Margie.
Thanks. Thank you.
All right. So for the second half of our Catch the King training, we are going to dive into actually walking everybody through joining the Catch the King event with the Sea Level Rise app. So for those who might have been joining kind of throughout the past hour or so, the way that we're kind of pitching this is if you have already downloaded the Sea Level Rise app, you're familiar with the program, you feel confident in the app, feel free to get up, go grab yourself some lunch, grab a cup of coffee for this section, but come back to us in a little bit because we are going to go over some resources and how we're running Catch the King this year. Otherwise, always good to have a refresher. So feel free to stick around with us and walk through the app. There are some new features that we'll talk about a little bit and some new processes for it. So we'll go into that in a little bit. So that's how that's going to run. And I think we can just get right into it. So this is going to be a bit of an interactive virtual training. We're not going to, beg anyone to come off mute or anything like that, but we do want to get you familiar with the React button down at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So this is how we're going to kind of monitor how we're doing along the way. And we are going to run with like majority rule. If most everybody looks like they're ready to move on, we will continue with that. Otherwise, definitely shoot in the chat if you're getting really stuck. I'll have Stephanie kind of work on the side for anyone who's stuck. And we might go back at the end if we've got some time to help anybody else. So this is interactive. We're going to use that React function. Yeah, Christina, good question. We are going to go over, there is an issue with the Google Play Store right now. We're going to walk you through that as well. But thank you for bringing that up. So the things that we're going to use is that when you click on your React button, you're going to do a thumbs up when you're ready to move on. So we're going to do it step by step, thumbs up when you're ready. Raise your hand if you get stuck or you have questions. And then clap hard or celebrate, of course, along the way. When you learn something new, you find something cool with the Sea Level Rise app. We're going to practice this really quickly before we get into it. So if you could raise your hand if you already have the Sea Level Rise app downloaded, please. Okay, looks like we might be walking a lot of folks through it. I'm excited. Cool beans. And also along the process, just make sure you guys are muted along the way. Just raise your hand when you have a question and we'll have you come off mute as well. So raising your hand, you guys can go ahead and lower your hands. There should be a button there at the bottom that asks you to lower. If you already have that app downloaded, if you haven't already, I would double check for those with an Apple or an iPhone. Check your App Store really quickly just to make sure there's no update. And if there is one, go ahead and update it. It shouldn't take more than a couple seconds to download. Now, raise your hand if you've participated in Catch the King before. We're just practicing here. Show of hands, who has participated? Who's some of our returning volunteers? Nice. Okay, awesome. Okay, you guys can go ahead and lower your hands. Thank you. All right, so starting at the very, very beginning to download and register for the Sea Level Rise app, we've got a couple of QR codes on the screen for you. For our iPhone users, this should take you directly to the App Store, so you can go ahead and scan the QR code or just search for Sea Level Rise in the App Store, and you should find a logo with this little water droplet logo. You should find something similar that looks like that. For our Android users, when you scan this QR code, it's going to look a little something like this. Right now, as far as I can tell from our app developers, we've been talking with them over the past couple of weeks. They've gone under a transition of kind of ownership on the Google Play Store, that they're actually transitioning our management of the Sea Level Rise app on the Google Play Store to Wetlands Watch. And so there's been a lot of changes behind the scenes. We have a very temporary solution for this, especially with our webinar today. We wanted to make sure people could still download it. I will say this process will give you a couple pop-ups along the way, and it will seem sketchy, but I can guarantee you it is not sketchy at all. Because it's kind of a behind the scenes back-end coding process to get people to download the app. I can assure you it's safe. It just looks a little wonky along the way. So bear with us for all of our Android users. When you scan this QR code, it should pull up the instructions that look similar to this. If you hit download APK, I'm actually going to play this little clip here of an Android user going through the process. It's about a minute. And so for those with an Android, I would just take a second and watch this video for the next minute or so, just to make sure that you're seeing what our volunteers are seeing. And if you have questions, definitely raise your hand or hop in the chat if you get stuck along the way. But this is what it should look like for you guys. Oh, and there's you can also get to this download link through our Sea Rising Solutions portal, but just follow along from this step since you've done the QR code. If you have a browser, you might have to give it permission to download the file. And from what I understand, this is what's going on in the background whenever you do download an app from an Apple or Google Play Store. We just don't see that many steps because they make it all nice and easy and pretty for us. And it should be downloaded somewhere in your files, which the volunteer will show. Yes, good question, Mike. If you already have the app downloaded on Android, you will have to go through this process to update it. I believe we're on Sea Level Rise app version 5.0. That's what we're aiming for today. And then it should download right onto your phone once you have the file opened. So I know that was a little bit confusing. I do want to sit here for our Android users. Let me get my screen to do its thing again. Did anyone with an Android have any issues with that process? Is anyone still stuck on the download? Perfect. If you guys, again, if you have issues, raise your hand, drop it in the chat. We want to help you now. Perfect. Okay, so everyone's got it downloaded. Once that app is available on your phone, you can go ahead and open it. And our next step is going to be logging in and registering for the first time. So when you open the app, you should see a form that looks similar to this. And at the very bottom, it should say sign up. So you're going to tap that blue button that says sign up. And you're going to fill out the form with your first and last name, email, create a password, and then if you have an organization or an affiliation that you want to share with us, feel free to plug that in. This entry is not required. Zip code and then terms of use, of course. We'll give everybody a chance for that. And for folks who are doing this kind of as we're going along, please give us a thumbs up when you have finished that step and have hit sign up at the bottom. And yes, Gail, 4 is the latest. I think we're about to launch the 5.0, so keep an eye out. We'll send out alerts and things like that when our app's been updated again. 5.0 is in the works. 4.0 is the current. I know I saw one thumbs up. We downloaded the app and it does not allow us to open the app. Ooh, that's an interesting one. Stephanie, do you want to work through the chat on that one? Thank you. Sorry about that, Kelly. We'll see if we can get you figured out. Okay, I know I've got a couple more thumbs up. At this stage, is anyone not ready for me to advance the slide? You can raise your hand or give us a little reaction. Okay. When you sign up with the Sea Level Rise app for the first time, there is a verification process. You should get an email from Sea Rising Solutions, and you have to click the link in that email. It just signals to our system that you're a real person and you've gone through the same old reCAPTCHA process that confirms you're not a robot and whatnot. So check your inbox with whatever email you use to sign up for the account. If you don't see it, check your spam folder. Sometimes with new respondents, especially one from a more kind of techie development side of things, sometimes your inbox will automatically filter those out. But do check your spam for an email that looks a little bit like this, and it should have a link in that email, and you will click that, and it should open into a screen that looks a little bit like this. For folks that are doing this along with us, if you could give me a thumbs up that you found that email in your inbox and have done the verification, that would be awesome. Just so we can check in. Yeah, it might take a second. Thank you, Sarah. It might take a second to hit your inbox depending on your internet service and all those things. Christina, if it's telling you your email's on another account, that might mean you've already registered. In which case, I would see if you can try to recall a password that you may have used to sign up. And if that doesn't work, it may be that you didn't do the verification the first time around, in which case we may have to work with you kind of asynchronously. Stephanie, if you remember how to check that on the Sea Rising Solutions portal, Christina, all you need to share with us is your email address and we can look for, oh, you're on Android. Is it letting you open the app, Christina? Or is it like to find where your email is telling you your email is on another account are you inside the app? And you can just share in the chat. For everyone else, is anyone not ready for me to advance the slide? You can raise your hand, give me a thumbs up. You got one. Okay, I see you, Ellen. No problem. We'll give you another second. And thanks to everybody for bearing with us through this process. We always think that this is a really good way just to get everyone ready to use the technology. This webinar will be recorded as well. And so for anyone who wants to reference back to this video, or if you have other volunteers who haven't downloaded the app yet and you want to share this part of the process with them, we will be able to do that. Oh, the QR code, no problem. I can stick that back on the screen really fast. It's there in the bottom right for Android. Okay. So next up, we're gonna get started. So when you open or you do your verification link, you should be able to open the app again and sign in with the information that you provided. So put in your email and your password. That screen looked a little bit like this. So this photo on the left-hand side, you should be able to input your information and hit login. And when you've done that, your screen should look a little bit like this. Can I get a thumbs up for folks who are seeing their My Regions page? For those who have had the app before, you might have a couple of regions listed here, but let me get a show of thumbs up for folks who've made it. For folks who have made it to the Discover tab, again, this is where you're going to see our Catch the King region. So we divvy up mapping locations by region, and then within those regions, we create individual mapping events. The region pins on the map will not be all encompassing. The address that's been set to those pins are meant to encompass the region name that it is. So we've sent, for instance, the CTK Norfolk region to our home base office, Wetlands Watch. That does not mean that that's where the only mapping is going to occur. We just have to set a location on the map for that region pin to appear on the Discover tab. So it's a representative pin, not just the exact point that you guys are going to map. So you're going to tap the Discover tab, make sure that official filter is turned on. These are official events associated with Wetlands Watch. This is a free to download app across the world, so we have lots and lots and lots of people using it. If you hit all, you can see that, but we're going to work in the official space now just to make sure that we're working with a smaller subset of pins for you guys to navigate. So once you log in, navigate to that Discover tab, make sure the official filter is selected. And you're going to explore the map. For folks who are out of state, we might not have a region in your area. And so for anyone who wants to use the Sea Level Rise app for a region we have not created, that's another opportunity. Join our office hours or reach out to us directly. We can set you up with a region and make sure it appears on our map. But for folks who are in the coastal Virginia area, we have region pins set all around the coast. And so it should kind of show you where you're located, and you should be able to kind of use your fingers to explore the map. Start tapping on those pins until you find the CTK region that you would like to map in. So for instance, if you're planning on mapping in Norfolk, it should be this little pin here. There's a little kind of trio of them in Norfolk. So when you tap on it, this white text box should appear with the name of that region. It's the same for Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, Suffolk, Williamsburg, all up and down the coast. So find the one you're comfortable with, tap on it, and then tap that white text box that appears. So find it on the map, tap your pin, and you can zoom in too by using your fingers. So if you're not quite being able to tap it, feel free to zoom in, tap that white text box. Every once in a while, because there is so much data in this app and especially on the Discover tab map, it can take a second to load. So if you're having any difficulty tapping, give it a second, try again in a few seconds. And ultimately, if it is just not working for you, give it a refresh, open it back up, and try again. So we'll give folks a second to find the region that they are looking for. When you tap that white text box, you should see a screen here that says join. You're going to tap join, and then a little profile request box will open up and you're going to hit join again. If you want to share a note about your participation and where you're coming from, how you plan to map, feel free to add that there. Not required, but we would love to hear more from you. And then as that goes along, we will get you into the right space. Stephanie, are you okay to switch gears for a quick second to look at the members coming in, or do you want me to do that?
Yes, I can do that. We have a question about all the Norfolk pins in the chat.
Yes, so there should be a CTK Norfolk pin. There is a Measure the Muck pin, and I think an ODU pin. Let me look, or a NSU pin. Let me double check.
And the training, I think.
Oh, yes. We have a CTK training region. So if you're curious what the other pins are, you can just tap on them and that white text box should appear with the name so you'll know what it's for. So yeah, the others in Norfolk. CTK Norfolk is for general volunteers. If you're participating in Measure the Muck, they will go through that process with you in joining the Sea Level Rise app Measure the Muck region. And then we have a training region, which we'll talk about a little later. Not required to join, but CTK Norfolk is your main channel if you're doing in Norfolk. I think there's also one for NSU down there as well. Sweet. This is the only approval process in the app. So as we, again, want to make sure that we are connecting with our volunteers every step of the way, there is an approval process that happens when you join a region for the first time. So if you're joining CTK Norfolk or otherwise for the very first time, Stephanie's going to be working on the back end to get everybody approved into the right region. All the regions that are labeled CTK at the beginning are our official regions. So as well as, Measure the Muck and NSU, anything that's affiliated with our event will be on that official filter. But if you're just working with a locality name, you will see CTK in front of it. So just know you're in the right space if you see that. Once you've been approved to the region, which again, Stephanie is going to be working on over the next couple minutes. So if you don't see it yet, no worries. You're going to see that region pop up now on your My Regions tab. So whatever region you've just joined that you plan to map for should pop up there. When you've been approved, you'll be able to tap that region and it should open some menus here. Could I get a thumbs up for folks who have joined the region and have made it into a screen? It might not look like this. This is the mappings tab, but you should have access to more information and these tabs at the top if you've been approved. Yeah, oh, I love seeing those thumbs up. Thank you guys. Perfection. Anybody stuck here? Perfect. So inside each of your regions, we have designed mapping events. So, and also know you can take a breath if you know you're going to map in Norfolk or wherever you've selected. That is the only time you will ever have to join that region and go through the approval process. The only tab you're going to be concerned with moving forward is inside that region. The mappings list is our list of events coming up. Stephanie has gone through and added dates for both our wet run coming up in September and our official Catch the King Norfolk event. It should say 2025 CTK and then your locality that you've joined. So this could say Virginia Beach, this could say Poquoson, this could say Suffolk, this could say Eastern Shore. So we're going to work with the official event right now. So keep following us along, but you can go back and join other events later, especially if you think you might participate in the wet run. So tap the region, tap the mappings list, find that 2025 CTK event, and then tap join. There's no approval process for joining an event, so this should be lickety split and easy for you guys. Can I get a thumbs up if you've made it there? Beautiful. Lovely. Okay, good. Awesome. And then, so again, use that same process. If you think you might map in more than one region, feel free to go through it again and join a different region and then join this 2025 CTK event in that region as well. We're just going to work with kind of this one flow path for you guys, but feel free to go back and join as many regions and events as you are interested in mapping for. The next tab we're going to explore together is your data collection tool. So in the bottom right of your Sea Level Rise app, there's a tab called Tools. And this is what you're going to use out in the field. So when you have your phone in your hand, you're getting ready to collect that flood data, you're going to open the Tools tab. Your location and the pins that you collect will appear in this mapping window at the top. There's a little drop-down box for mapping events that you've joined. Right now, especially for folks who are doing this for the first time, you've just joined the CTK mapping event, it will not show up in this drop-down box until the date it's meant to occur is open. So for instance, Thursday, October 9th, when we change the date for that event, that is when it will show up in this drop-down box. So we're going to go over these tools, but you won't be able to select an event just yet until we have that mapping event open. There's a GPS signal strength bar. This is really good to pay attention to into the field. We'll talk about it a little bit more later on. But keep your GPS signal strength around 80 to 100%. We want that as high as possible to get the most accurate data collection. You can also capture photos and notes. So not just dropping pins, but you also have this add an optional note and capture photo button. You can capture a photo and a note for each individual pin you drop. There are obviously a lot of reasons why you might not want to do that. So my recommendation to you is to do your floodwater data collection, kind of walk along your water line, and then turn around and take your picture of the flood mapping that you've just completed. You can along the way, especially if you see things like trash in the water. I know in some cases in the middle of the street, sometimes fish make their way into the middle of the water. If you see any issues with wetlands migration or any way somehow the floodwaters are interacting with your community that would be unique to know and to share with others, definitely take pictures of those. But every time you hit that drop pin button, you'll be able to add another note and a photo. So don't feel like you're restricted to just one, although we definitely don't want you to do a note and a photo for every pin that you do, if that makes sense. So that's available to you. And then the drop pin button, simple as that, is your easy data collection tool. When you're in the field, all you're doing is hitting that drop pin button as you're walking along the water line. Any questions about the Tools tab? Perfect. This is what it'll look like when an event is available for you in the Tools tab. You'll be able to select that drop down and it will pop up just like this. To collect that flood data, and we're again going to talk through a little bit more protocol in a bit, visit your flood location. So work ahead of time to figure out where you're going to map. And we'll release some resources through our newsletter and whatnot that will help guide you to the right places. But you can always pick, your own spot if you're aware of flooding. You can pick your backyard, things like that. Select that event from your Choose an Event drop-down menu. So when you're going out for Catch the King, your 2025 CTK event will pop up here. Make sure that GPS signal is as high as you can get it. And then as you're walking along the outer edge of that floodwaters, and I can't stress enough, along the outer edge is all we need. No one should be walking through floodwaters. Margie should have made a good enough case, for you guys to know not to walk through the floodwaters. But be really safe and only go as far as you have access to. If you see the floodwaters receding into a really thick brush area or it hops over a fence, don't go trying to map areas that are not easily accessible to you. Just do as much as you can in a public space. Don't trespass on private property and things like that. Once you finish your full delineation, so you're walking, 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 dropping your pins every couple of steps, then you're going to hit Save Data at the very bottom. That will kick you out of the Tools tab and let you know that you've done your data collection, it's been saved, and it's been all good. Any questions on that process? Perfect. Here's a couple examples of what mapping looks like. This is our executive director and her 3 cute kids out in, I think this was in Suffolk, taking a little stroll along the outer edge of the water line. Wear your waterproof shoes. Again, I wouldn't recommend going out in sandals or flip-flops or anything because you don't want that flood water touching you. But walking along that outer edge is what we're aiming for. And then here's another example. This is that same street with the big apartment building. And I don't even think the floodwaters were fully in at this time. So find that outer edge, and that's where you're going to do your walk-in. Data collection can look really different depending on the flooded area, so not all data sets are going to look exactly the same. So you can tell as we zoom in on those pins, this looks like about every 3 to 5 steps as you're walking along that flood line. So on a beach, it's really easy to do this. You're just walking along that water's edge. In more urban areas, it can be a little trickier, especially if you're working in a super urban area with a street. Maybe it's a storm drain that's backed up and is overflowing. Be very, very, very careful, especially in places like this. And you might want to visit your site ahead of time just to make sure that it's accessible and easy for you to map. But again, data sets can look very different depending on where you're headed. If you are doing data collection on the beach, this is kind of the most popular way to collect data with the Sea Level Rise app. We love seeing these data sets come in because it's just a beautiful linear line. Please make sure if you're taking photos, you take a photo that demonstrates where that floodwater line is coming inland. So a lot of folks will love to take a picture of the beautiful water going out to sea. We'd love to see these photos. However, it's not very statistically significant for us. We can't draw many conclusions from what the floodwaters are doing by looking at the photo on the left. But the photo on the right actually shows us the rack line and how high that tide came in that day. So if you're on the coast and on the beach, take photos more like this as opposed to the beautiful ocean water You can still send those to us, but in terms of data collection, definitely take the one on the right. If that whole process, if going through the tools tab, doing the full delineation, maybe you don't have time to go out during that high tide and you want a little bit of a different option to engage, there is one last tab that we didn't cover. It's called Trouble Spots. So on your app, you should see it. It's the third tab to the right. This is a way to put just a single pin to notify where it's flooding. So instead of doing a full delineation of that floodwater, you can actually just drop an alert and say, hey, it floods here. And then that allows us to send other volunteers to that location. We'll use it in future Catch the King mapping. So when we send and design like sign up forms for volunteers to go to specific locations, we check our trouble spots map to make sure that we capture any points that volunteers have indicated it floods, but maybe they don't have time to do the full mapping. So you can do this by clicking that little big, the big plus button there in the bottom right, and it will pop up with just a comment box and a photo. So that's all you need to do. You can say that there's a lot of flooding here. The floodwaters are moving. It's in the street. It's from the storm drain. Anything relevant to that flood location, you can type it there, and then you can add a photo. And it should look a little something like this. So once it's uploaded to the map, users can actually tap on those pins and it should come up with the mapper name, what description they've added, and then the image that they attach to it. It's a faster way to collect data. It's really good to include things like the location, where is this flooding happening, what type is it, was it during a tidal event, a king tide event, or a rainfall event? What are the local impacts, the frequency of the flooding, and other visual observations that you might find out in the field. Some tips, definitely wear waterproof shoes and protect your phone. You're going to be working in and around floodwaters, so bring a waterproof case or a baggie. Only map where it's accessible and safe, and use the note function to provide comments on where flooding extends beyond your reach. So if you come into one of those areas where floodwaters are extending into private property, over a fence, into a marsh area, you can use the note function to say, I couldn't make it over there, but flooding definitely extends that way. That's always perfectly fine. Don't map on private property unless you've been given permission. So don't trek into your neighbor's yard if you see flooding going over there. You might be friendly with them, but maybe they don't want their data in our Sea Level Rise app, which we understand. And take lots and lots and lots of photos while you're in the field. Some other tips. When you register for the Sea Level Rise app, there's a liability clause in there. We also do this when we do registration for the official event. And when you did your interest, well, maybe we don't have this on the interest form, but we always want to make sure that you guys understand the risks. Evaluate the site before mapping. Always a good idea to go out early, check on the site, make sure it's actually flooding there, and also that you have access. Dress for the weather and water. Always try to go with a buddy. We do have lots of independent mappers, but of course in the field data collection, it's always best to do with a buddy. Don't trespass on private property, can't say it enough. And if you've got young kids who want to participate this, especially for some of our teachers who might be interested in this program, make sure there's a mentor or an adult out there with them because these floodwaters can be a bit dangerous. Don't climb on rocks, especially if you're out on the coast. I know those berms can be very enticing, but please do not go out there. Even docks, if you see a dock is slick with water, be very careful. Those can be very slippery, very fast. Thinking about our boat ramp areas. And then if you're doing roads and parking lots, the buddy system is really good to have someone keep an eye on traffic and the flow of cars and other people. Viewing your data, I've got to pick it up here in a minute. Viewing your data is possible through the Sea Level Rise app. So after you've collected data, you can actually go into your region, go to that mappings list again, and you guys can do this now. You can check out 2024 data in the regions that you've joined. So you'll tap the event that you're interested in viewing pins for, and then there should be a pins tab at the top. So you can actually go through and see where others have dropped their pins in the past. In terms of communicating with others, there are a couple of messaging boards inside the Sea Level Rise app. So if you tap the region, you should see a messages board pop up at the top right next to that mappings list. This is a really good place to get in touch with all of the folks who have joined your region. We have tide captains sending messages here saying, this is where I'm going to be during Catch the King. Other volunteers will say, hey, does anyone want to meet me out at this boat ramp? I need a buddy for my buddy system. So there's a couple of messaging opportunities for you as well. Alerts to changes in like tide levels or changes in dates of certain events. Sometimes we as Catch the King coordinators will send some messages as well. And then sharing your experience, always a good place to say, I had a great time mapping. This is what I ran into. This is what I did. There's also a subset inside each individual event. So it's crazy. We've added lots of layers to this app. Not only can you message people in the entire region, but for a specific event as well. So say you have you wanted to go collect data during Hurricane Erin. We could have created an event for that. And inside that event, there's an updates portal, and you can actually add updates. Again, very helpful for things like changes in time and location. Where are you meeting up? What time? Sharing your whereabouts. If you can't find each other in the field, it's just another messaging portal for you guys to do that. Questions on all of that? I know that the app training can be a little bit tedious. We're going to go over this in just a second. We have lots more training events coming up this season that you can come in person with us and we can actually work with you hand in hand. This, as Stephanie mentioned in the chat, will be recorded. So if anyone needs to return to this, definitely look out for that in our newsletter. Any questions at this stage? Ooh, Mike, great question. Yes, we have lots of videos, not just for our Catch the King program, but from our partners that can be helpful for teaching about this event. We can definitely connect with you on that. Good question. Yes, Greg, you can participate in South Carolina. The best way for us to coordinate that with you is probably to drop your email or reach out to Stephanie and just mention that's where you're interested, and we'll set up a region for you. Make sure you've got a space in the app to collect data. Thank you for participating. Super excited for more states. Any other questions at this stage? Perfect. Thank you guys so much for bearing with us through that. And for folks who, again, got stuck at the beginning, we'll make sure to coordinate with you and make sure we get you into the process. So don't worry.
We have
That's,
another question, Gabby.
oh, how can we
Well, we've
check for
got
an update? Yeah, go ahead.
Ellen as well is unmuted for a question. So we got one in the chat and one with Ellen.
So how will I know? How will you contact me? How will it happen?
Stephanie has your email now, I believe, right, Stephanie? And she'll reach out to you directly. You guys can find a time
Okay.
to chat. We'll make sure you get in there, Ellen.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay. Cool. Oh, and Bill, you can check the App Store. If you're an Android user, you might have to go through that Android process, although maybe I think you are an Android. Maybe we can communicate offline, Bill. You might want to wait until we get the Google Play Store up and running again before you check for your update, as opposed to going through the QR code process. There was a QR code we shared earlier to get you in there. Oh, good, Christina. I'm glad. Yeah, Bill, we'll catch up with you after the Zoom. All right, I've got to fly through a couple more slides for you guys. Again, I know it's so much data and information to digest. Can't thank you guys enough for sticking it out. Inside the app, there's lots of resources to support your mapping. We've partnered with the Department of Conservation and Recreation to include a Share Your Flood Story survey. If you're interested in helping inform the state's statewide master flood plan, and to talk a little bit more about how flooding impacts you as a homeowner, as a renter, as a public citizen in this area, please feel free to check that out. You can find that survey by tapping the 3 lines in the top left corner of your main homepage of the app. And you should see a link for Share Your Flood Story there. There's a help button as well. If you get stuck out in the field and you're like, oh my gosh, what do? I can't get in touch with Stephanie or Gabby. You can come to that same profile menu, 3 lines in the top left, and tap the help button. And this is an immediate kind of help troubleshooting list of links and resources and tutorial guides that will help you troubleshoot the issue while you're out in the field. And then, of course, at the end of the day, shoot us an email and we'll make sure we can get you sorted. There is a troubleshooting forum linked on that help profile. So if you come across something super unique, you're getting stuck, your app's doing something funky that you don't know how to describe, we've got a troubleshooting forum that'll walk you through that process so you can report it to us and we'll work with our developers on that. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie to go through our mapping resources, and that should round it out for our webinar.
Yes, thank you, Gabby. I will go through these pretty quickly, but also with enough information so you can understand what's available to you. So we'll go ahead. So this is kind of an overview of kind of what I'm going to walk through, but everything that I'm about to talk about is on the Catch the King Toolkit webpage. So this page, it used to be if you're returning a Tide Mapper or Tide Captain, this used to be the app FAQs. We've turned this into kind of like your one-stop shop for how to volunteer, how to participate, and how to plan. You can go ahead. So the first thing is we do have a newsletter. So we have the Catch the King newsletter in addition to some really great newsletters that Wetlands Watch puts on themselves, including that high water watch one that Gabby was discussing. And so you can scan that QR code or visit our website. And if you scroll all the way to the bottom, there's a button for you to select for subscribe. And you can subscribe to just the Catch the King newsletter or all of the above. This one also has you have to a confirmation email for you to confirm your subscription. So make sure to do that, and then you'll be in the loop for Catch the King emails. And then training. So you all got this training today. We do have a Tide Captain training coming up on Saturday, September 6th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. That is going to be at the Virginia Institute of Marine Science in Gloucester Point. So we do have a sign up live and available for that. It's a super simple sign up genius. So if you are interested in being a Tide Captain, taking on more of a community leadership role, or if you're interested in what that training would look like and kind of want to test the waters before you commit, please join us. We'd love to have you. And that is, again, it's on the website under trainings. And then we are going to have regional in-person trainings in a bunch of locations around where our regions in the app typically are. So, we will announce those on the website and then also in the newsletter and on our Facebook groups when those are live. I have already added one for Norfolk on the same sign up page that the Tide Captain training is. So just know that there are more that are coming up. We're just still finalizing those logistics. And then another resource is to help you understand what those daily tide charts look like and understand what they're telling you, but also how can you navigate them to find tide predictions near you. So we have a one pager that will help you navigate the NOAA tide prediction stations. So you're able to click on and find the one closest to you and really target in for the weekend of Catch the King or for a wet run where that high tide time frame is for you to go out and map. So that is also on the toolkit webpage. And then we also have an interactive map for you to be able to see where there's some high flooding areas where people have mapped in the past or where we might have some issues. And then we also, this year is going to be new. We're going to have a sign up sheet so you can kind of tell other tide mappers, hey, I'm going to be at this spot during this part of the high tide window. We're doing this so that you all are going to be able to see kind of where everyone's planning to be and identify kind of where some of that data, those data gaps are, so we can get a good spread of data and not everybody is meeting up at the same waterfront park. So that is coming soon, not yet ready. And yeah, we can go ahead forward. And then we also have a Facebook group. So if you are on Facebook, that's a spot where we'll drop pretty much everything that also goes into the newsletter for the most part. We'll put the highlights in the Facebook group. So a great place to stay in the know. And then, like Gabby mentioned, I have office hours. So every Wednesday from 12 to 1, you can join. There's no registration required. This QR code and that link are also on the Toolkit webpage. But you can join, drop in, ask me questions. We can go through this entire training again. I can help you figure out how to access your account. This is time that I will be there. No one has joined me yet, so make me not sad and join me next week. And then, Gabby, did you want to take on this one?
Yep, I've got it. Yes. So, as Stephanie mentioned, that CTK newsletter, let me take you, I think I have you on Spotlight. That CTK newsletter is the best way for you guys to get information. We post our training events, Stephanie's office hours, everything under the sun under there. So definitely, if you're going to pick any channel to connect with us, definitely do the newsletter. Register for Catch the King. We will launch that sign up form for locations on the Catch the King website as well as the toolkit. So we'll do that through our newsletter, but just know that that Catch the King webpage is our homepage for that. Stephanie has designed this beautiful Catch the King timeline for us to keep everyone up to date on where we are in the process. We have that wet run date September 12th through 14th and CTK weekend October 10th through 12th. So save those dates if you don't already. Make sure you join your Catch the King region and 2025 mapping event in the app as soon as possible. We did that today together, but if you are stuck along the way or you want to do it later, definitely make sure you do that ahead of time. Sign up for the newsletter and then visit the toolkit again to review all of those resources. Some additional opportunities we will be running the arts competition again this year. This was a major hit for us last year. And so this flyer will be updated. We're actually changing the terms of it a little bit as last year was our first pilot. As with all good things go, we do need a revision process. So it will henceforth be known as the Tides of Tomorrow Jane Brinkley Tum Arts Contest. And the Tum family is connected very closely with the Dave Mayfield family, who are original founders of the Catch the King program in honor of the late Jane Brinkley Tum. And so we're very excited. Jane was connected so deeply with the artistic community, and they are sponsoring the awards for that contest. So we're very excited to bring that back. More information on that coming soon. Again, sign up for the newsletter if you want information. And then there's that Measure the Muck flyer again. Super excited to continue partnering with this program through ODU. Alyssa will be your main point of contact for that. So again, feel free to indicate on the interest survey that you're interested, but also reach out to Alyssa directly. And her email and phone number are there for you. We always end the show with a bit of thank you. These are all of our 2024 partners and sponsors. Many of these folks are working with us again this year for training events, outreach, and all of the goodness that happens in between. And so we're very excited again to work with many of these folks and to do some more fun stuff this year. I know that that was so much to pack into 2 hours. Myself and Stephanie will hang on for anyone still struggling. Ellen, especially if you want to hang on, we could work with you for a few minutes to see if we can figure, as well as, I don't know if we still have Beatrice or Kelly, but maybe we could reach out to them too. But thank you guys. It looks like we've lost quite a few folks between now and then. So thanks for everyone who stuck around for the ending. Reach out anytime, sign up for that newsletter, and we're so excited to support your participation in Catch the King this year. We'll let everybody go, but if you have questions, feel free to hang on for a few minutes. We'll be here for the next couple, but have a fantastic rest of your week. Stay safe in the flooding, and we'll look forward to seeing your data come in this October. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, folks.
Okay,